Hey, welcome back, everyone. I want to go into some interesting stories today. One of them actually pretty dang concerning that teachers, at least in New York City, who refused to get vaccinated were put on these problem lists, which are being held by the Department of Justice and the FBI and also local law enforcement. In other words, including using their fingerprints, there is now a database in the FBI of unvaccinated teachers, at least in New York City. Um, there's some big concerns about this. I also want to go into Canada weighing new censorship laws, digital IDs, the FBI issuing warnings against Catholics. Actually, I'm going to write that one off because sourcing is not that good on it. But I also want to cover some of what's happening right now with the with the chemical spills, because there's been some, frankly, pretty dang concerning updates on this, including including news of it getting into the water supply. And again, this is about 10%. This is water for about 10% of the country. Now, you believe who you want to believe, right? There are people testing the water. They're saying it's coming up and it does not look safe. There are official sources saying that yes, it's in the water, but because of the way it's getting diluted and because of the flow of the water, it's going to be safe, and so no worries about it. You be the judge of this, right? Make your own decision on this. I'll be showing you the evidence. We'll go over it. That said, folks, those of you on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, join us on Epoch TV, epochtv.com. I do about 25 minutes of the show on every other channel, and then we jump over to Epic TV. And Epoch TV is our exclusive video platform. I do an hour-and-a-half show, so be sure to join us there. That said, folks, thank you so much for being here, and let's jump into the first story. I want to go into some breaking news first. Let me show you this. Now, you remember yesterday's episode, we've been talking about this train derailment in Ohio, East Palestine. And basically, new information's coming out, which is showing probably what could be criminal wrongdoing. Some people are going to be held accountable for this. One of the big findings now, and I want to go over a few updates, including the water supply, but hear me out. One of the big findings now is they apparently did not label the cargo as being highly hazardous material. This is the allegation, but coming out now. Let me show you this. This is the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine. Epoch Times says that he marveled on February 14th that the cargo of a train that derailed in Ohio on February 3rd was not defined as high hazardous material. DeWine said Congress should act on what he called an absurd situation, as the train was not deemed highly hazardous because only a few cars had dangerous contents. In other words, because they had, of course, 50 train cars, I believe 10 of them, from what I read, had hazardous material. Because it was only 10 of them and not 50 of them, it was not labeled as being hazardous, as it should have been. Again, the big point I'm going to make that I believe is going to become the main talking point probably a couple months down the line is the fact that remember the rail workers were talking about holding a protest. The rail workers were going to go on strike. Those of you who've read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, the Great Strike, know about the idea of a rail strike and what that means for a country. The Biden administration shut that down, even threatened them with possible prison sentences had they gone forward with it, and people were forced basically to go back to work. The rail workers and the rail unions were noting that it was unsafe, they were overworked, they were understaffed, they were tired, and basically it was becoming a danger. They said it's becoming dangerous. We're the ones transporting stuff. This is not going to last. They were told, keep your mouth shut and go back to work. And here we are now that basically what they warned about has now come to pass. I can tell you now that the company is being called out. It turns out that some of the major investors were names we now know, Vanguard, BlackRock, and others who are making record profits. So you're going to watch the local companies take some blows to this. And we're seeing now that somebody, we don't know who's responsible for it, did not properly label the chemicals being held in this train as being high hazardous materials. So you're going to watch a good, maybe a train of controversy go through, and it's going to go from the lowest level all the way up to the federal government in terms of who done it, who's responsible. Now, let me show you something else, because this is one of the bigger concerns in terms of basic safety. Epoch Times says, this story says, plume of chemicals in Ohio River moving downstream after train derailment, according to officials. Now, let me explain why this matters. Keep in mind, if it's moving downstream, it's not going to be a permanent, I don't believe at least, it's not going to be a permanent thing, right? But it is going to be a momentary danger if, let's say, those chemicals catch someone or whatever else. They claim it's going to be diluted enough where it's not dangerous, but we'll see. But they report here, a top Ohio environmental official on Tuesday confirmed a plume of chemicals in the Ohio River is currently moving downstream after a train derailed in East Palestine that was carrying toxic chemicals. This is a quote. We know there is a plume of chemicals moving down the Ohio River. That's Tiffany Kvelik, the head of the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the Water Management Subdivision. She said this during a news conference. And she said, quote, we think it's on its way towards Huntington, West Virginia now, she added. When pressed further, Kvelik said the plume is comprised mainly of fire combustion chemicals, and it says there could also be multiple, quote, volatile organic compounds that are being carried on the train in the Ohio River, but are, quote, very diluted. They found, in addition to vinyl chloride, which was probably the most concerning one, they said there were 4 other chemicals basically being carried on that train. Ultimately, she said the plume is moving around 1 mile per hour down the Ohio River. It's slow-moving river, relatively, saying it is diluting as it travels downstream. The Ohio EPA does not believe the plume is threatening the quality of drinking water, she added. So they claim it's safe to drink. Now, let me show you the other side of that, because there are people more on the independent side saying the water is not safe to drink. Be careful with it. And let me show you a quick video of this. There's actually been several, but I'll just show you one. This is a guy on Twitter. And it says they're testing out water outside East Palestine, and the results are not good. Quote, the contaminated water is bleaching all the colors out of these testing squares. There's obviously something in the water in large quantity that is being hidden. Now, when you watch this video, he's going to show you the testing squares. The people have raised issues. Oh, it's not changing color. The issue is not that it's changing color. The issue is that it's bleaching out the colors of the squares in their entirety. Let me show you this video. Something strange is happening. Let me play this for you.
All been carefully tagged. This is the Beaver Creek watershed. In regards to the East Palestine train crash, this sample I'm looking at today is from By Road. This is probably within about 2 to 3 miles of the train crash. This is the closest water that I was able to gather outside of the containment zone. Here on the right side, we have Little Beaver Creek. This is upstream from Beaver Creek before North Fork joins in. So this will be my clean sample of what our water should be. If you take a look at these 2 containers side by side, you can already see that the one on the left here is not only misty, it has almost the appearance of like a chilled alcohol, versus this one on the right that you can see entirely through. That just looks like standard water and plastic. We already have some strips done, but I'm going to go ahead and show you 2 more. I want to record this in a continuous video so that there is no questionable doubt. This is a new strip picked at random. Dirty water. We're going to put it in the contaminated water, shake it to make sure that we get all the air bubbles out. This strip will go on the left side with the rest of the contaminated strips. The nice thing is that those ones have been cooking, so we have plenty of time to wait to see the results. This is clean water from Beaver Creek. This is what should be in our waterway. This is what our fish should be swimming in. Same test. So now if you look at all of my results here, on the left side we have the contaminated water, in which you can see it is bleaching all of the color out of these squares, not so much actually changing what color they are, versus the right side. Look at how picture perfect these strips look. You can see that there is obviously something in this water in large quantity that is being hidden. Just go back to taking a look at these two containers and you decide.
Anyways, folks, there's actually been several videos like this, including people testing the water from their taps, in their own homes, and there are people using testing strips, and the water is showing signs of contamination. I will let you be the judge. The EPA says it's safe, right? People doing home tests say it's not. Again, they're also saying that it's diluting as it's going downstream, meaning it's not going to be any kind of permanent damage, we assume. But for the time being, use your own judgment, right? All right, folks, before we go further, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. And as we've been talking about as well, inflation is going to continue, and it is, and likely even get worse. Even Fed Chair Powell is warning us to brace ourselves for this. He said, "Well, folks, there is one way to hedge against inflation, and that's with physical gold and silver. American Hartford Gold makes it simple and easy to diversify your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver. And in one short phone call, they can have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or into your IRA or 401k. American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A+ rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them right now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders, so don't wait. Call them now. That's 877-260-2764. That's 877-260-2764, or text Joshua to 65532. Again, 877-260-2764, or text Joshua to 65532. And big thanks out to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring today's episode. All right, folks. Let me show you something else. There have actually been other train derailments, and I'll talk as well about what happened in Tucson, Arizona, with the I believe it's nitric acid truck crashed there. Let me show you this first, though. This is another train derailment just took place. And this one right here is in Houston, Texas. And I've heard of others as well now happening. Personally, I do think this is concerning. 1 sec. Yeah. Now, this one, I haven't seen any news of like a chemical spill or anything like that, but it looks like you are having issues with train derailments. Now, I should note, I have been looking into it because I've been seeing several reports of train derailments. I believe Louisiana also had one. There's two different narratives going on right now. One narrative is saying train derailments happen all the time. There are over 1,000 a year, some people say. Every single day, just about, there's issues like this. I think I don't see it in the news all the time. This is my personal gut feeling, is that the way train derailments are defined are not necessarily crashes like this. The threshold of what would constitute a train derailment in terms of like legal terms, I would assume is probably a lot less, which is why the numbers are so high. Full trail derailments of this type, where it's actual crashes, typically when it happens, it's big news, and we don't see it that often. And so, personally, that would be my take on it. I do think this does lend credence to the concerns raised by the rail unions that people are overworked, they're understaffed, and I think they're being squeezed from two different sides. They're being squeezed from the side of business with 1-day, 2-day deliveries, more expectations on that, not to mention higher demand because more people are buying online than just in stores. Although even then, typically supply and large scale supply doesn't really change whether you buy it in stores or from the internet, because the trains typically are going to be delivering to the stores as well. Although you could argue single-day delivery come from further out would need to be transported in ways like this. The other side is they're being squeezed from the political the kind of the side of policy. And as we mentioned, the Biden administration did override the unions and made it so they couldn't even hold a general strike. Something we're going to be hearing a lot more about. Now, with that being raised, people are probably wondering, well, what about the government? What about the transportation secretary? Where is Pete Buttigieg on this? Well, Pete came out. He's actually been in the hot seat for quite a while because he's been going on vacations. Him and his gay lover adopted a child, and they were, celebrating parenthood, going on vacations and so on. There have been issues, for example, with the airlines going down, bad orders, it looks like, software updates trying to add inclusive language to the databases, which may have caused a major error, which shut down all airlines during a major holiday season during Christmas. You're seeing issues like this, and repeatedly, whether it's the shipping crisis, ports, and just basically goods stacking up at the ports they can't get out, right? There's difficult things like this. People were wondering, hey, Pete, what are you doing? Right? What's going on with this? Well, Pete came out just after this whole thing happened, train derailment and so on. And people were pointing out something concerning, which is he did not even mention it. He has not said anything, at least not yet, about the train derailment or about the chemical spill. This is the post-millennial, and what he did talk about, rather than talk about all these issues, what he said is this. He's complaining there are too many white people in construction. Now, Pete Buttigieg is the transportation secretary, not Department of Labor, not whatever else, but he's saying that he's looking like he wants to address the problem as he sees it of too many white people working jobs in construction. It says this, as concerns grow over the lasting impacts of the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment that resulted in the burning of vinyl chloride to prevent an explosion, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg remains silent on those concerns in a Monday conference, instead focusing on the number of white construction workers in the country. Now, I've personally worked as a carpenter, actually. My dad runs a business of doing carpentry, and my stepdad operates heavy machinery. I've grown up around the construction business. I can tell you, there's not that many white people. Not that would be an issue in general. I don't know why the color of someone's skin working a job means anything. If you go to Home Depot these days, you see a lot of Latin Americans. I think they're the ones kind of taking over the industry for the most part. But it's weird that, in my opinion, he's raising concern over this at all, given that he's the transportation secretary. This would be a Department of Labor thing, and even then, I would say is racially discriminatory. You don't discriminate based on someone's race or national origin. I would say that's a violation of the Civil Rights Act, even raising these concerns, let alone the way they're handling this. But rather than talk about East Palestine, rather than talk about train derailments, rather than talk about even this chemical spill that happened in Arizona, in addition to all this, which I'll get into in a second, he's talking about white people and too many white people in construction, as he claims, which I don't see as a problem personally. There's Pete Buttigieg, and he's also going after Elon Musk, by the way, for transporting toxic materials, because he's saying that moving brains from the monkey brain chips they're doing, moving them from the monkeys and checking them out, is transporting them. And so they need to investigate Elon Musk because of that. Something that looks like it's frankly politically motivated. Folks, keep in mind what that means is that if you transport anything now, it may not mean you're driving it. If I pick up my cup and I transport it to the other side of the table, Pete Buttigieg may be able to regulate it based on the logic he's using. So I'm transporting this cup to my mouth, which is actually a fine green tea, by the way. Falls under regulatory, falls under regulatory authority when I transport it like that, right? All right, folks. Let me get to the next point here, because I want to tell what's happening in Tucson, Arizona. Then I want to get still in what's happening with the FBI database on teachers, but I want to cover some breaking news because a lot's going on right now. You may have seen some of the stories. Hazmat teams deployed in Arizona, a chemical leak. Again, people were already talking about East Palestine, so this is bigger news because of it. Let me show you what happened. This is 12 News. Driver dies following crash in I-10 near Tucson. That's in Arizona again. Hazmat crews remain on scene. Hazmat crews are working to contain a situation on I-10 in Tucson. It says authorities have confirmed a driver in the crash has died. And they're saying now that basically what happened, the Department of Public Safety said the driver of a truck involved in the incident
developing
died.
news out of Tucson tonight.
Sorry about that. According to the officials, the vehicle involved was a truck tractor pulling a box trailer. The truck flipped following a collision and is leaking a hazardous substance onto the highway between Kolb and Rita Roads, officials said. The State Department of Public Safety, State's Department of Public Safety said the hazardous material has been identified as nitric acid in liquid form. Now, I spent a lot of my night looking up the nature of different chemicals, including acids and so on. Nitric acid, I believe, emits a sulfur dioxide, which is the yellow smoke you're looking at. It is of a lesser lethal type of acid. If you get it on your skin, you may be okay for a bit. You would want to wash it off immediately, and maybe make it inactive using some kind of substance, for example, like baking soda or something like that. But here you see what this is looking like. They did put the area on lockdown. They had people locked in their homes, and they told some people to evacuate. It's something deeply concerning to me, more so because we're seeing this, one incident after another taking place. Now, this we're watching with the nitric acid is I do not believe going to be any kind of large scale disaster. This is not going to cause any kind of long-term effects. What we're watching in East Palestine is, in my opinion, much, much more concerning and going to cause a whole lot more long-term problems. Nitric acid, again, not technically being one of the more intense acids. Its spilling is still of concern, but not necessarily going to be any kind of long-term problem. All right, folks, that says jump into one of the first big stories today. I want to talk what's happening with the FBI having a database of unvaccinated teachers. This has to do with what they call problem codes. And if you were working a job, if you had a government job, if you're a teacher, you work for any kind of say a department under any kind of local government, they have what are called problem codes, which they need to submit in terms of reports on you. I don't know if everybody does this, but they do, at least in some states, New York City in this case. And this puts you on an FBI database when they do this to you. Let me show you this. This is Teachers of Choice, and I went and verified this. I went and got the full documents on this to make sure it was real. But let me show you what I found. On February 8th, 2023, while arguing on behalf of fired New York City workers who declined COVID vaccination, Attorney John Birch stated in open court that unvaccinated teachers in New York were flagged with problem codes in their personal files. And when that occurred, quote, their fingerprints are sent with that flag to the FBI and the New York Criminal Justice Services. Now, the source of this information is Betsy Combier, who wrote an affidavit in the Kane versus de Blasio case, where she stated unvaccinated teachers were given a problem code label that was, quote, then sent to national databases of both the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, the DOJ. In federal court on February 8th, attorney Susan Paulson, who defended New York City, stated that educators fired for declining COVID vaccination were not removed for misconduct, but rather for not meeting a requirement for employment. Hear that, folks? We didn't remove you for misconduct. We removed you for not listening to what we were saying. And if you want to have your job, there are requirements for employment. Now, that requirement for employment was something they created that nobody probably saw coming, right? Mandatory vaccinations. And when you refuse to get the mandatory vaccination, they remove you for not meeting a requirement for employment. Now, in my opinion, that's a ridiculous argument, arguing that, again, it's a play on words, right? In my opinion, that you're not being fired for, you're not being fired for misconduct, but you would say that not meeting or not carrying out an act of conduct to meet a requirement for employment would be what you call misconduct. The student was not removed from the classroom for misconduct. The student was removed from the classroom for behavior that was not meeting a requirement of attending the class, right? those of you who were rebellious in school might laugh with me on this, right? Yeah, the child was not misbehaving. The child was not meeting the requirements for staying in the classroom. You see, it's a play on words. This is very clever legalese they're using, in my opinion. But it says here, if there was no misconduct, why are unvaccinated educators' fingerprints being sent to the FBI? Right? If there was no misconduct, then why are they putting people on problem lists? It's going in your permanent record in the truest sense of the phrase here. Let me show you, folks, Exhibit 1. Literally Exhibit 1, at least in this case. This is a court document. Declaration of Betsy Colombier. Let me show you the actual court document. And further in, she states this. She's qualifying herself. She says, I am also very familiar with problem codes. The flag, the DOE, that's the Department of Education, puts in the personal files of employees to indicate that they should not be hired due to unexplained misconduct of some kind. Again, remember, they're arguing there was no misconduct. We were just removed for not meeting the requirements of employment. But if these organizations are reporting people, that is based on the idea of misconduct and making it so they cannot be hired. She says employees can be flagged for everything from receiving an unsatisfactory or ineffective rating to engaging in egregious criminal acts. During the 3 years I worked at the UFT headquarters, I received countless calls every week asking me if there was a problem code on an employee's personal file, meaning organizations seem to be very concerned about these problem codes and they want to make sure that employees do not have them. Meaning if you get one, it's going to impact your basic quality of life to a very serious degree. When that happened, she said, I would simply ask the person next door to my office, another UFT special representative, whether she could check her computer, and she would tell me yes or no within a minute. Further in, she states, when the DOE, Department of Education, puts a problem code in the employee's personal file, it also places a flag on the employee's fingerprints, which is then sent to the national databases at both the Federal Bureau of Investigations, that's the FBI, and the State Division of Criminal Justice Services. And she said something very concerning after this, where she states this. I know of many former DOE employees, Department of Education, who have problem codes in their personal files because they declined to be vaccinated in violation of the DOE's mandate and were not granted a religious or medical exemption. The DOE places a problem code on the employee's personal file immediately upon getting information that the employee did not submit proof of vaccination. As soon as the employee gets the vaccination and submits proof, the code is removed from his or her file. So if you refused to get vaccinated and you're a Department of Education employee, including a teacher, you may have had a problem code submitted on your permanent record. And that problem code could damage your future ability to get hired or who knows what else. If the FBI has that code, I don't even know what they use it for personally. But they're called problem codes. Something of concern and something I think that needs to be looked deeper into. All right, folks, that says jump over to Epic TV, and I want to go into what's happening with a few other things, including digital IDs. In Canada right now, they're pushing for this, as well as other things like internet censorship. But there's also some interesting stuff, kind of, well, it's not just Canada, let's put it that way. And I don't know if I'd call it interesting, but there are Democrats in the United States right now pushing for something else, which is the mandatory microchipping of employees at different companies as a way of tracking you. So it's not just digital IDs; it's something injected under your skin, which would work as a tracking device or things to monitor you in different ways. This is being promoted right now, and I'll go into that. That said, though, folks, let's jump over to Epoch TV first. Those of you on YouTube, join us on Epoch TV. It's our uncensored video platform. Being there also helps the show keep going. You might notice I don't have ads on YouTube. It's because they do not like me. They frequently give me strikes. I don't know why they don't like me. I like them. It's a one-way relationship I have with YouTube, apparently. But join us on Epoch TV, where I can speak freely. There's no concerns about stuff. Before we jump over, let me show you a trailer. Victor Davis Hanson recently spoke with American thought leaders. He's talking about the spy balloon, Orwellian newspeak, and what he calls the top-down revolution that's now engulfing the United States. Let me show you this.
I'm just bewildered that these two evil regimes are so asymmetrically treated, as we saw with the balloon. And again, if Russia had done that, we would have shot that down the moment it got near the Aleutians.
Today I sit down with classicist, military historian, and author of The Dying Citizen, Victor Davis Hanson.
Everything is topsy-turvy. The woke obliterates everything. It's destroyed liberalism.
In this broad-ranging interview, we discuss the erosion of Western civilization and the top-down revolution he sees engulfing America.
Then they have the audacity to go back and blame these prior generations for doing what? Defeating the Kaiser or Hitler or Mussolini or Tojo or Brezhnev or Mao. It's really stunning how arrogant, incompetent, and bankrupt this generation is.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick.
Hey, folks. Victor Davis Hanson always gives some great points on things, great analysis. Be sure to check that out. That's exclusively on Epoch TV. With that said, we're going to jump over exclusively to Epoch TV as well, so join us there. And folks, thank you for being here.